Grand Rising, everybody. Now, like coming to live, Spirit and Coffee. Got my coffee here. Pumpkin spice. I am one of those people who absolutely loves pumpkin. So there you go. All right. So reading from the Emerald Tablet. I haven't been on here for a couple days. Just so you know, been taking care of my health and getting my health in order. For those who don't know, I get iron infusions. Typically, my iron goes very low. I have to go get infusions and various other things going on with my health, women's stuff. So there you go. You get older, women's stuff happens. Yay. So there we go. So been taking care of that. So I'm back now. We're talking about the Emerald Tablet, right? Which is good. And it's Alchemy for Personal Transformation. Really awesome book. Highly encourage that you read it. Now, talking about Balinus, now he was the greatest alchemist, is what this book says. And so his teachings came from the Emerald Tablet. So what he said about the Emerald Tablet, right, is that he in the book or the public gatherings, he talked detachment from worldly affairs. Now, this is really hard, and this is part of what I do. Purity of thought and action, tolerance of all life and existence of the supreme God above all other gods. He urged people to look inward and held that the empire of man lies not in the knowledge of things without, but in the perfection of the soul within. His primary message was the union with God. The one mind of the whole universe is possible for each of us. That one mind is the same for everyone and can be found in meditation. He told his close friend, whenever you think of on high matters in solidarity, meditation, you will find me. Okay, so again, when we're looking at or we're talking about great alchemy and the great work, and this is what kind of bothers me. This is my trigger. Okay, this is Natalie talking, and perhaps a little bit of ego in here, but what drives me nuts is that people start to look at this information on the external world. They want to know how they could manipulate, which is not a word that we use in alchemy. If you're using it in harmony with the earth and with yourself, is that we don't manipulate. That's not part of what we're here to do, manipulate. Now, some people will manipulate, and the consequences of that become detrimental to a lot of individuals, including the person. So it's hard because I was watching this video the other day about sacred geometry. Now, sacred geometry is something that it's a medicine that comes to me. My sacred geometry is my own. And when I started listening to this individual, he talked about manipulating the elements. We don't manipulate the elements. Hey, Shadow, how are you? Hey, Wendy. We don't manipulate the elements. That's not part of the process. You can work with the elements and you can ask them for guidance, but to manipulate becomes even more distorted. And I think we're like 5 times removed from our inner God. If you think about it, we're removed from that. Is that even possible to manipulate elements? That's a great question. They try to. That's what chemistry is about. That's why chemistry, as an alchemist, right, as a spiritual alchemist, we needn't manipulate anything. We merely transmute and transform energy just by our presence. We don't have to manipulate. We work in harmony with. Now, if you look at what's happening in the world, and we can just actually talk bigger and bigger and bigger, and this was part of the teaching. If you hear Balinese, he said he does not, and he taught detachment from worldly affairs. Detachment from, and that's part of what I teach. We want to get caught up in our worldly affairs and what's happening here. And we stop focusing on ourselves. If people started to really focus on the internal world and understand their soul map, they wouldn't manipulate anything. They wouldn't have the need to. They would be working in harmony with the world around them, not against it. Where we see the distortion, right? And if we looked at worldly affairs that are going on right now, particularly the governments and the way that they are handling, quote unquote, their people. If we start to look at it, is that true, and is it in alignment with God's law, our natural law? The answer would be no. It's not. So that's how I determine who I follow, how I follow people, who I listen to. I listen to language very closely. So if someone's giving a speech, a lecture, I listen to the words they're using. That's going to tell me who they are and what their intentions are, basically. So if we started to look at chemists, or we looked at how chemistry, if we looked at chemistry and how it relates to the manipulation, spiritual alchemy was the transcendence of the soul, right? Finding the philosopher's stone, the holy grail. What is that? And everybody's looking externally. It actually exists in you. That's what Jesus Christ said. That's what Buddha said. We can look at all these great prophets, or great these spiritual individuals, right? Sages and great teachers. They all say the same thing. Stop looking outside and start looking within. Now, what they did with spiritual alchemy is they created chemistry, and they started to work with elements, and they started to try to create things. Now, I'm not saying that it's not good to create. That's not. It's what's the intention behind it, and for what is the use. Typically, people are using the chemistry, right, to bend reality to their own desires and wants. If we started to look at how chemistry evolves, we know that chemists actually do all these tests on animals. Like, is that right? Is that right mind and right heart? When they're injecting, these animals with chemicals to see what the reaction is that in harmony with the earth? Or is it caging an animal that's supposed to be set free in its own habitat to just live? So when we start to look at it, we see that their manipulation of the elements, right? And trying to manipulate the elements to do what? Like, what is the intention? Why? For what purpose? They'll say it's for our survival, the survival of humankind. Most vegan food are made in laboratories also. Yes. No, it's not right. Looks like a damn science lab. Exactly. See, so when we see that, they're manipulating stuff to call it something else instead of letting life naturally unfold like a flower. Now, if we were in harmony with the earth, we'd be like the animals, right? We wouldn't be trying to manipulate and control, and it would just naturally unfold. The seasons would just happen, and we would be at one. But it doesn't work that way. Humans are very different. We're sabotage. We self-sabotage, and then we sabotage each other. He was speaking of not getting involved in those affairs. Why? Because there's programming, and I've talked about this before. Good morning, Command. Good morning, CHS. Good morning, Patient. Good morning, whoever else is on here. That if we start to look at it, there's programming, right? Okay, so the programming comes from people in higher places, right? They're and I wouldn't even say higher places. They think they're higher. Let's just put it that way. Some of these people on this planet think they're God. Okay, are they gods? Well, we're all gods. We all have God within us. But they take it upon themselves to tell and to move people the way that they feel that they should. What is the best outcome? Like, they know what's best for everybody, rather than focusing on themselves. And people tend to look at those individuals for answers rather than looking to themselves for the answer. It's very easy. Just give me the answer. Show me the way. Right? And we follow all these other people's ways, all these other people's programs. Just tell me what to do. But when we start to look within, we start doing our own work. And when we start looking at our own work and what we're doing, we have the answers within. Now, is it a pretty scene? Sometimes it's not. We're battling our own internal demons, right? And I did talk about that the other day, that we have these many personalities, archetypes, energies, whatever you want to call them within us, that are fighting to take the wheel. And sometimes those energies that we battle are not very kind, right? We have sometimes we have those manipulative ones that are trying to manipulate situations and causing havoc within our families and our friends and in our networks. And we're like, why are we doing this? We're self-sabotaging. When we learn how to work with those energies, though, then we can start to create our own reality, that reality based and grounded in love and compassion and kindness, and in synergy, in oneness with the universe, with the cosmos, with the earth, with the elements around us. We become the magician. So rather than manipulating, we work with it, not against it, not to be listen to people's language. And I think within the alchemic and even in the alchemy um, group of individuals, because they've done, okay, so here's the deal. I was listening to this guy, right? And they talk about initiatory practices that they do, right? The Brothers of Light, you know, they have all of these different Masons, all of these orders that were secretive or just teaching what I'm teaching, which is spiritual alchemy. And they were teaching these things, to very few people. And they're okay for good reason. For number one, Plato, Aristotle, all those people, if they were teaching this, they would have been killed, literally. Jesus Christ was teaching this stuff. Everybody that was teaching it in the time ended up, Jesus Christ ended up dead, right? And they would have killed him. Even Da Vinci himself was an alchemist. And in his alchemy, he hid it too, because he would have been killed if he would have been giving this information publicly. So they call it esoteric because it's hidden. And the Egyptians, right, it comes from Egypt, had a lot of the systems, but you can see alchemy in every single indigenous practice when we go across. So spiritual alchemy, they say it's for the few, and it's only because the few will actually go through the process of spiritual alchemy. Most people just want to be told. Alchemy is a true process of your internal alchemy. It has nothing, people are looking to other people for alchemy, right? And they go into physics, they go into chemistry, they go into mathematics, but literally it was a result of the internal spiritual transcendence of the soul into the external world. So basically what happened is people were internally understanding their soul, their unconscious mind, or their connection to the divine. They try to express that connection, and that expression typically comes out in mathematics, usually comes out with sacred geometry, usually comes out in physics and chemistry, but started and derived from spiritual alchemy. So people don't really know that. Now, the hidden secrets that were never given to people and individuals, you can find them on your own if you follow the journey. But it takes you actually doing the journey, because your alchemy is going to be different than mine. My process is mine and mine alone, and it is interconnected to physics and all that stuff. But what am I going to do with the information is the question. People will tap into these places where they call them downloads. People, and I call them downloads too. Some people say I'm getting downloads. Okay, good. Downloads of what? What's the information coming through you? And that information, how are you going to utilize it here in the material world? Remember, this is practical use of esoteric work. This isn't like not using the information, but how? How is it in harmony? How is it in connection and oneness with the world around us? And is it to manipulate? Now, this information in the wrong hands can distort and manipulate, and that's why they didn't want to teach it as well. Because they were like, well, if we put it in the wrong hands, what the hell's going to happen? Well, we see the result of that today in our government, believe it or not. Our governments were based on these principles, and they used it in manipulation. They left a lot of information out, and they left people in the dark. So people are constantly, that's why they say, oh, well, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're this, you're that. Really what's happening is people understand and know that there is something that has been kept from us. That's something that is not being told. The whole story is not being told. We know this, we get this. Look at the storyline. But if we get caught up in that storyline, guess what? We're caught up in their manipulative alchemy. We're caught up in their programming. And like Balinese, I say, don't pay attention to worldly affairs. When you start to get in those dialogues, you start to be programmed by them. The way that we untangle all of this chaos and craziness that we've done within the world is starting to understand who we are and wake up to who we are. Only then can we start to heal. We can't heal on the external until we heal on the internal. So knowing who you are is critical. We'll say, well, who are you? That's a big question, right? Because people will give surface level answers like, well, I'm a mother, or I'm a father, or I'm a grandparent, or I'm a student, or okay, that's very surface level. Who are you really? Who are you? And if you even looked at yourself, this is a scary question for a lot of people. Go to the mirror, look at yourself in the mirror, at your eyeballs, and keep saying, who are you? Might give you some chills, actually. Like looking into your own eyes. Have you ever even tried to do that? See, looking at your own reflection, looking at your own self and saying, who are you truly? There is two main things here. Understanding who you are at the microcosm and at the macrocosm. Now, here's another mistake that they do, is that when they talk about the microcosm, they talk about what? Astrology, the stars, the heavens, as though the heavens are outside of us. Guess what? They're internal to you. You are a universe. I don't know if you really know this about yourself. I'm going to remind you, you're an entire universe. Your whole body is a universe. As within, so without. The entire universe exists within you. It's right here. You don't need to look outside. When you understand your internal world, you'll understand the external world. You'll understand the cosmos when you understand the cosmos that exist within you. Now, I don't mean from a scientific mindset, left brain, let me look at my cells and see what's happening. That's not what I mean. Because science is doing that, right? It's fragmented. Science is fragmented. And I'll tell you why. It's fragmented because it's left out the most important part of the story for ourselves, which is our intuition, our subconscious mind. The part of us that that is probably the most powerful. That internal understanding and knowing. You guys know. You know. You don't need to prove it to anybody. You don't need to tell anybody. You know what you know. And internally, you know that there's something inside of you, and that is the extension of God. You have, it's not like there's only certain, see, that's another thing that they did. They lied about it. Only I can talk to God, and only I have the message of God. And if you follow what I'm telling you, you shall find God too. No, that's not correct. Correct way is everybody has God within them. Everybody has the ability to connect to God. Everybody is God in motion. You can't be outside of it. That doesn't even make sense at all. Doesn't even, how can that make sense? How tell me how that makes sense. Good morning, Renewal. How does that make sense that we could live outside of God? It doesn't. God, if God is the one thing in the one mind and the one everything, how do you live outside of the confines of that? You don't. You live within it. Okay? So you yourself are God in motion. Now, how do you tap into and reach that connection to God? Well, you start to have your own conversation with God. You don't need to prove it to anybody. You know what you know. Now, how you use that information when you're connecting to the divine is important. What is your intention? How do you plan to use it? What medicine has God given you? Everybody has their own medicine. Everybody has their own way of communicating it. Some people are artists, right? And if we looked through history and we looked at all the great alchemists, they believed in God. See, that's the thing. People think alchemy, that's another thing that they did. Ugh, it frustrates me because everything really is under the umbrella of spiritual alchemy. It's almost like it's God's law, literally. Natural law is really what spiritual alchemy is. It uses the principles of the sacred law, which we didn't create it. We're just observing it. We're here. We're participants in it. That's what we are. We're participants in God's show, in God's dream, in God, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it the great dream, the great illusion. But you're part of that. So think about it at night. Like you go to bed, you sleep, right? And there's characters that show up when you have dreams. Who the hell are those characters? You don't even, yeah, I'm like, I never seen this person. Who is this? But guess what? They're there. And guess what? Who created them? Well, my mind did. My mind thought up this entire whole world that's outside of this quote unquote reality or three-dimensional time space that we exist in. Dreams, you can see it from that perspective. That's why they call it the Brahman. The Brahman falls asleep and we are an extension. We are part of that dream. We are part of the characters in God's creation. We're not outside of it. It doesn't exist outside of us. It exists within us and without us, all together, all at once. So you have a connection with the divine that's solely yours. And what ends up happening is people are like, well, I have the way. Well, no, you don't. You have a way, not the way. You have a way to the divine. And your way could support another person down their journey, but their way is going to be a little bit different. So when you guys are connecting into your divine self and that source, there might be some information or quote unquote downloads that you receive. There might be a message given to you that is solely for you. And ask, what is this for? How do I utilize this? Whose medicine is it? Is it just my medicine? Am I supposed to share this medicine with the world? See, they said that we couldn't dialogue directly with God. And my dad got really mad at me one time. I'll tell you this. My dad is Catholic, and there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing right, wrong, whatever, with the way he thought. Okay, it's his way of thinking. It's his way of connecting. But I told him I've talked to God since I was a little girl. God and I are homies, right? We are. It's just I've always known. And he's like, you can't talk to God unless you go through Jesus. I'm like, no. Christ, if Christ lives within me, well then I'm talking to all of them at once, if you want to see it that way. But you do have that ability, okay? Who can take that away from you? That you can't talk to God? Yes, you can. What do you mean? You are God. You're God in motion. God is with you always. It's not like it's disappeared. Can't disappear. It's you are it and it is you, right? So I do agree Jesus was sent to us to teach us what we continue to do wrong. Yes, Jesus, but yeah, we can talk to God. Yes, Jesus was a great individual. I love the passages, and probably the easiest one to, they call him a creditor. And I took this course called Creditors in Commerce, and they talked about creditors and debtors. There's a language that we use. That's why I say language creates. If you're using debtor language, you're usually in disharmony with the things around you. If you use creditor language, you're in harmony and you create win-win situations. Debtors don't create, creditors create. So that's the language that they used, was creditors and debtors. And we were told that Jesus Christ was the greatest creditor known to man. And I believe that because the passages he used were simple, easy, and they are relevant even today. right? Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. Simple. When you surrender to God and you believe fully in God, you don't care about materialism. You don't need it. You know that you're going to be taken care of no matter what, and that this world is abundant. It is abundant. And of course we take that for granted, but it is. Now, are we going to be eating the chocolate cake if we let go of all of it and go to the woods? No, we probably will be eating plants that don't taste as good. It's a sacrifice, but we'll survive. That's what I tell people. Everybody's afraid. Oh, the world of this. If we just went out to the mountains and try to understand how to eat from the earth raw, we would survive and we could survive. It wouldn't be the way we wanted to. Might be uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean that we can't survive. We just have to give up our comfort, see? So give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, give unto God what is God's. I love that quote, right? Let he who live without sin cast the first stone. Hey, Linga, how are you? Hey, Spanky with beans and weenie. that's a funny name. All right, Jeff. Good morning. Those on Facebook. Good morning. I don't know who's on here, but so we would survive. Just wouldn't be the comforts. And that's what I talked about. We're at a time right now where people are really trying to figure out where they want to go. Are we inviting Linga? Let's invite Linga. I always like to have Linga on here.
Hey, ma'am.
Hello.
How you going?
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Just did a reading for someone. So,
Oh, good. How do you feel?
yeah, I feel good. Yeah. I hear you were talking about sustainability.
Yeah, pretty much. Sustainability. Well, it was really, me, I kind of go all over the place sometimes, but it ended up on, yes, us being in harmony with the earth, in oneness with the earth, and eating off the plants. Go ahead.
I've been getting this drive lately to tell people to start critically thinking. I don't know what it is, but I don't care which side of the fence you sit on, but people need to start to stop being passengers,
Uh huh.
People are just rolling along with things at the moment, and it's not working. Nothing's going to change. You can't just be an idle passenger in this current time and place in the world. You have to stand up and actually be counted. That's what I'm feeling at the moment.
Yeah. Well, let's look at it this way. There are going to be, okay, this is what, so there's the game. If we saw life as a game, hey, radio projects, if we saw life as a game, right, there's going to be different ways that people play the game. Okay. Radio projects might like this because he was listening to game theory at one point. So the game, right, is that you're going to have people who play the game, people who watch the game being played, which are just standard buys or whatever, right? Or you're going to have people that are on the sidelines just watching. And if you thought about it, like if you just look at a baseball game, right, you're either in the game or you're not in the game, or you're refereeing the game, or you're creating the game. So I think at this point, especially with Spirit and Coffee, the people listening here, it's not about playing the game, it's about creating the game. You are the creator of the game, your game. That's really at the end of the day, it's the message I'm trying to get out, is that you can create your game. You don't have to live by the game of others. Now, it seems almost nearly impossible when we're saturated with the way the world's going and our world leaders, like, how do we do that? How do we, and again, it starts with, yes, critical thinking, where we have logos as being the number one thing. Logos being not just language, but actual mathematics, sacred geometry, and the way that we actually perceive the world. That those logos actually are our magic. They create our reality and the way that we see it. So critically thinking, right, is rhetoric too. So it's called the triumvirate or the triumvirate, I think it's called, where they have the different levels of understanding for critical thinking. And of course, one of them is questioning. But what are we questioning? And to whom are we questioning it to? So, yes. Okay, go ahead, Linga. What do you have to say to that?
No, that got me deeper. Um, yeah, that's true. Like I think that well, it starts with questioning yourself. You know,
Uh,
I think that people need to actually just understand, like have a stronger understanding of what it is they're actually doing. Because what I'm seeing is, and it's frustrating, is I'm seeing a lot of people following people.
uh-huh.
There's a lot of protests and riots and stuff down here at the moment, and there's a lot of people in those movements that are genuinely thinking and saying, you know what, I've had enough. I've had enough of this, and this is I want something different. So they're standing up for their rights, which
Sure.
is, and overall, like there's some dickheads in there that are doing it violently, but the vast majority of people are not doing it violently. They're actually just standing, like they're standing and they're obstructing and they're being, obstructive. They're not full violent riots, but the police are having to arrest people, basically carrying out orders or doing whatever they're told, or public health orders or whatever else. So there's things happening, but there's still people following those people that don't understand why they're there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side of the equation, we've got cops that are, some of them standing down from the job because they've had to
Mm-hmm.
get vaccinated, but there's a
Okay.
lot of them that are, like vast majority are just going, okay, I'll do what I've got to do to keep the job because I
Sure.
need food on my
Sure.
table.
Sure.
So I'm going to do whatever the fuck it takes to get it done.
Sure. Sure.
And
Go ahead.
yeah, they're all following. Well,
Sure.
just the majority is following.
Sure. Sure. And so literally Spirit and Coffee was raised from teaching people before all this stuff hit the fan, right? So like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and I knew that this was coming. I didn't know how it was going to play out. But I had prophecy, right? And that's part of my medicine as well, as being able to feel when energy's shifting in the world. And I knew. And I got on Spirit and Coffee was an extension of that, to teach people to, yes, think for themselves, to teach people that they have their own unique way of alchemizing or spiritual alchemizing their own reality. They have the ability to do this, to wake up. And I think about 4 years ago, I kept telling people, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Okay, great, awesome. So people have been trying to get people to wake up already. Here's the deal, Linga. Some will, some won't. And that's okay. What I've come to the conclusion of is that some people will not wake up. They will not. They're going to continue. They're going to follow those programmings. They're going to continue to do whatever they're told and not think for themselves. And is that okay? Yeah, it is, actually. This is where we, right, the people of the great work rise above it and rise above it so that we can start to create. Otherwise, we get entangled in the conversation. So we rise above it and we say, okay, we can't change the mind of those individuals. There are just going to be some people who are just not going to, and that's okay. The information is there for them. We still love them. We still care about them. We still hope that one day they get it, and they may or may not. And that's okay. It's when we get attached to the fact that we think they should. It's their journey, their story, their life. My niece, she got a shot. She said, "Hey, I'm going to do it." Okay, that's what you want to do. She understands this work. She knows, but she chose it because that's what she wanted to do. Now, here's the people that are going to change the game. The individuals who can rise above that conversation. That's what I was reading actually before you got on here, was this book, The Emerald Tablet, Alchemy for Personal Transformation. And he said, don't get involved in worldly affairs. Detach yourself from the worldly affairs. If you get caught in them, you start talking in their programming, in their language. And you can't solve the problem with the same mind that created it. Okay? That was Einstein, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can't. If we are to be the light workers and we are to rise above it and we are the ones who are going to shape and change the reality, then we have to rise above those conversations. But we can't be trying to drag people along. Or we can. I mean, you can do that. I'm not saying you don't, but there are just going to be some people that don't. There's just going to
So
be
what
people
do you?
that don't. Oh, go ahead.
So what do you? After 5 years of telling people to wake up, and now you're asking people to just step above this nonsense that's happening in this matrix that people are existing in.
Mm-hmm,
What you're
mm-hmm,
saying is that you can manifest your own reality,
mm-hmm,
which
mm-hmm.
is different to whatever the down here in Australia at the moment. There's a buzzword going around about you'll get your freedom back if you're vaccinated. That's the words that our leaders are using, right? You'll get your freedom back. Now,
Yep.
yes, that's all matrix stuff, right? So you
Mm-hmm,
can, because the first thing I said was, we never had my freedom. You never took it off me. You asked
exactly.
me to stay in my house. You asked me to stay in my house because there was a pandemic going on and you didn't want to overload the health system. You know what? I don't really have a big problem with that. I kind of like my house. I've got stuff in here, got family and things I can do that keep me occupied and fulfilled. So that's fine. I'll stay here. But at the end of the day, I can still go wherever I want because I can do
Yes.
whatever I need to do.
Yes. 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 And
I'm
it's
not going
that
to live in fear.
exactly. So the programming is what they're trying to set people's mindset in. And so that's why, and for me, I'm very careful, but I say just find your own programming. Stop listening to turn off the TVs. I think I said this, and I don't think you were on that show. I told people, turn everything off. Just turn it off. Be with yourself. Be with your thoughts. Here's the deal, because they could come and think about it, and this is not like new stuff. History repeats itself. It's very, if you just understand history, which you do, and I know Shadow does, if you go back, oh, and Christina, if you go back in history, Jesus Christ wasn't so popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
Buddha wasn't so popular. They weren't popular. What they were saying wasn't popular. They didn't want those individuals speaking up and reminding people who they were. They wanted to shut them up. That's really what it was. It's like shut them up. And they went against the grain, but they still spoke their deepest truth. And what happened to them? Well, they got killed. I mean, what's the
They're
worst that's
martyrs.
going to happen is that you get killed, right? And that's what they call, so that is a possibility, but no one can, if you know who you are, no one can take that away from you. Who has authority over you? No one. Who are you? You're a human being, right? Just like I am. And so it's knowing who you are. So yes, it takes a lot of courage. You're going to get backlash. You're going to have people that are projectiles coming against you. But when you transcend that, right, when you rise above it, you naturally don't even end up in those conversations. You start to transform the world around you. There's almost no words to describe it. Like, I can't describe my world to individuals. I try to every day let people know. I'm trying to teach people that they don't have to be part of those dialogues. They can be part of a different dialogue. My dialogue is, okay, so now that I have this information, what do I get to do? I get to work on my personal alchemy. I get to learn how to co-create in harmony with the earth. And if one day I have to go and leave this place so that I can set up that space or refuge or a place of safe passage, then I will do that. And I'll trust in God and I'll trust in my journey. but that takes trust. And those things, we get caught up in our mind. See, they've programmed a lot of people so much that they don't even know how to let that go. They can't even get past the conversation. They don't even know who they are. It's a lot of work. This work is not easy. That's why every time you get here, like, that's deep. Well, that's me every day, all day, because that's what it requires. The sacred esoteric wisdom is available to everybody. They call it esoteric, but it's not. If you start searching in yourself, you will find the answer. That Jesus said it, Buddha said it, all the sages say it, I'm saying it. You have the answers within you. And it's hard.
So,
Go ahead, Linga. Sorry.
so the power of fear.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people are living in a fear-driven world because they've got the TV on and they're listening to the junk, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So the fear is driving a different programmed response, which is I need to be saved, right? Or dependency, nearly.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's probably dependency is the best word. They're not like fully dependent, but they're dependent on information to make decisions, or they're dependent on a course of action because it's easier than thinking
Mm-hmm.
about it themselves.
Amen. Yes. And that's the majority of
Now,
the world.
yeah, and you know what's really interesting? Like, I think I don't know how many people are in here. I just want to make sure because I don't talk about what I do very often. There's a few people in here. That's all right. So basically, I used to deal with large disasters that were going to kill people, and back in 2009, I went to this area in Australia that lost 173 people in one afternoon, within about a 4 hour period, across about I don't know, let's say it was 500 miles. So there's a lot of people died in across a big area. Now, when I went there, I interviewed people about what happened to them, and some of the stories were horrible, like dead set horrible. Like they told me stories about losing loved ones. Some of them told stories about the planning that they'd done prior and the things they'd thought about how they were going to deal with this fire. And some of the others, it totally shocked me that they said, we walked outside, we looked up and saw a column of smoke that was probably 30 or 40 kilometres high. So you're talking like 20 miles high. So huge column of smoke, all black. Couldn't see the sun. It was howling wind. It was hot as anything. But you know what? We still hadn't heard anything. We still hadn't been told to leave. We still hadn't been given any instruction. So we just went back inside. The
Wow.
house burnt down. People died. And that was just one story. The thing that shocked me was how disconnected are we? Going back to your original stuff you're talking about when I came in. How disconnected are we for you to be able to walk outside your structure that you live in, look at something so catastrophically awful, and then go, oh, no one's told me anything. I'll just stay here.
Well, yeah, because that's what they're waiting for. So think about it. For instance, in another example, is right. I do independent contract work, and independent contract work. Um, when you start to do it, you have to be your own boss. Basically, you have to be able to move yourself forward. You have to motivate yourself. You can't be waiting on instructions to get things done. You just do it. That's what independent contract work is. Guess what? Most people can't do it. People that have high places have come to try to do it and they can't. And they're like, why? And it's because of that, because they're waiting on somebody to tell them what to do. People don't even trust themselves. They don't trust themselves. And why? Because they've been programmed not to. You're crazy. You have voices in your head. You're crazy. Oh, you feel that way? You're crazy. No, you're not. Every human has voices in their head. Every human has 50 different personalities they're dealing with. We're not always the same person all the time. We're dynamic. We're not fixed. We're not like robots, right? We have feelings, sensations. We have we view the world from different perceptions. We see different things. Your personalities are many, but you're crazy if you have them. No, you're not. That's what I'm here to say. You're not crazy. Now, when we learn how to work with them, that's why this work takes a long time, is you have to understand what exists within you. I can ask people right now, do you know all of the personalities that exist within you? Have you actually dialogued with them? Have you had conversations with them? People say, oh no, that's crazy. No, it's not. They're living within you. You'll dialogue with people outside of you, but what about the things inside of you? People don't know themselves.
Amen.
They don't trust themselves, right? They don't trust themselves. Tell me who I am. I want to know. And then they go and they do science. Well, who I am is this, or who I am is that. And then they look at physics, and then they look at all these other things. The answer's right there within them the whole time. It's been with them every step of the way. It's never left them. It's never left you. It's never left me. We just want to keep looking externally. And it doesn't matter how many times I do this show. It doesn't matter how many times I say it. There are going to be people who never hear it. And it doesn't matter. They can go to somebody else's show that's saying the same thing and they won't hear it. Right? There was a time in a prophecy that says, and there will be a time when even their eyes cannot see and their ears cannot hear. They can't see it. They can't hear it. There's just going to be people like that. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. Doesn't make them wrong. Doesn't make them bad. It's just their journey. But we have the ability to rise above that, right? And yeah, we might look at them and be like, come on, we want everybody to wake up. Like, that's the way it is. Typically, a light worker's trying to, like, we think we could save the world when that's not even true. We have to save ourselves. And in saving ourselves, we save those around us. Your so here's how, let me see if I can describe this, Linga. As you change your words, your language, and your worldview, and the scope and lens in which you see the world, you start to shape that world, that bubble. It expands out. And the people that enter that bubble will be speaking your language. They'll understand your language. And when you walk into a room, people that don't even understand your language, there'll be a point where they don't even see you. They can't even see you. And naturally, you evolve into the conversations that create a new reality or shape a new reality. It's almost like a bubble. It's really hard for me to describe in words because it's an experience rather than a conversation or words or expressions. You could draw models and charts.
To me, it's like it's more like an intent and a knowing that you're going to achieve it, even if it doesn't seem logically sound or not reasonable. Like, you know that this is going to happen, you know.
Kind of, yes. You can already feel it before it happens, and you know it's going to happen.
You know the steps, and you're like, this thing that I'm about to do is not going to get me there, but this thing will.
Yes, it's like that, and it's an experience. So the experience, so teaching people this work, right? Because honestly, this work, and trust me, a lot of the stuff I talk about here is very surface level stuff. It's very surface. It gets deeper because the rabbit hole's never ending, right? There's no end to all of what we can create or how we co-create with God. There's multiverses. There's different ways but you have your way. So you got getting to find it, and it's trusting yourself, right? It's trusting yourself. It's been hard too, because there were times when I didn't trust myself. I'm human. I'm in this three-dimensional time space. I'm like, am I doing it right? Who's, and then finally one day you start to go, okay, this is for me. This is for me. This is the information for me. And should I share it? Maybe. You'll know if you should share it or not share it. There's things I don't share on here. If you know, but later on, will I share it with a few? Yeah, I'll share it with some individuals for sure. But will it happen organically? Yes. It's not a forced upon. Like, oh, you have to do it this way. You don't. People will come to me when they need. People will go to you when they need. All of you light workers, your medicine and whatever you're creating, they will go to you organically. It will happen organically and you'll know. So it's like coaching, right? So as you do your work and as you wake up, you're going to understand. So again, it's being able to, like you said, you started off with, well, critical thinking, and then these people are just following, and maybe there's an urge inside of you to like help to support these people, to wake up, to recognize, to stand up. And guess what? I'm not saying don't do it, but some people will not hear you, regardless of how much you say it. I just promise you, I've been doing this work for too long. And some
Fair
people,
enough.
even my friends, right? There's even friends that just, and I just love them for who they are. I'm like, they're on their journey, they're on their path. They'll ask me, what do you think? Natalie, what do you think about this? Natalie, what do you think about that? And then I let them know. And then they say, okay. And everything that I explain never ends up in an argument. Why? Because I know creditor language. Even though it's not popular creditor language. I mean, even after Jesus Christ was crucified, they knew what they did wasn't right. They felt it. He was like, why did I do that? This man wasn't even trying to cause any kind of harm. He was just teaching people to remember who they are. Like literally, that was his teaching. Oh, remember, you are God. It's like that simple.
Yeah. Well, Natty, it's been good talking to you, but I'm gonna have to go to bed. So it's
Thanks, Linga.
half past midnight.
It's always very deep just before you go to sleep. Oh, look, that
Yeah,
rhymed.
it's like you get my subconscious like stimulated.
Well, hopefully it'll end up in good dreams. The subconscious will
Yeah,
bring up
should be
some
good.
good dreams.
All right,
Thanks, Lee.
mate. Talk soon.
All
See ya.
right. I always love having you on. Thanks. Awesome. So there you have it. Thanks, Linga, for always sharing. I love when Linga comes on. We have a couple of questions, and I don't think Shadow's still on here. Shadow had asked about Buddha and if Buddha was a healer. Yeah, in a way, he was a healer and performed miracles. They said he walked across the Rainbow Bridge and that he took people with him across the Rainbow Bridge. So um, I think we're all healers in our own way. When we do this work, it's natural that we heal individuals. We heal ourselves though first. So it's not about us being these great healers. We heal ourselves, and in that, the healing starts to move outwards into other pockets. So we heal us, and then our medicine then gets transpired into other individuals. Christine, I feel like our ancestors were far more thrifty. Everywhere you go, there are medicine people, yeah, and it's fascinating how well versed they are using elements around them. Amen. I usually stay out of trying to convince people of anything. Yeah, politics is too messy to begin with. Drama, yeah, and similarities much more peaceful. Amen. So it's rising above the conversation, rising above the programming so that you can figure out your own. Again, not easy process. Takes a lot of work, takes a lot of us digging into who we are, what we are, and where we are in this world. And when you do that and you start to reprogram yourself into, I would say, light. Here's the deal. I'm going to give you one more thing and probably maybe talk about this tomorrow. We are light. The programming is in light. So any conversation that's in the shadow or in the dark is the absence of light. So we shed light into it. Let light be your program. Let light program you. Ask yourself, is this conversation grounded in light? And that opens up a can of worms, because we're shedding light in places that were dark, perhaps places we didn't want to look at. And sometimes that brings up some very murky stuff that we don't want to look at, but that's part of alchemy. You cannot clean things out unless you know what's there. And then we can start to create our reality. And yes, as Linga said, we get to have critical thinkers. What does that mean? That means listening to the words. Number one, start with that. There's logic, there's reason, but logos being the number one thing, logos being not just words, but the interpretation of the world around us using symbology as well. Okay. So there you have it. So much more to talk about. Love you guys so much. Remember, God is within you. You are the light of God. You are the extension of God, and you do have that sacred connection. So please have your conversations with God. I don't know what God's gifts are for you, but they're there, and they're yours, and they belong to you. And the world is crying for you to tap into that so that you can share them with all of us. Okay, so there you go. Awesome. Have a great day. And of course, I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye bye.